You are watching Access LaPorte County, Channel 97. Coming up next, the April 12th, 2022 meeting of the Michigan City Board of Zoning Appeals. You can find information for this meeting by visiting www.accesslaportecounty.org.
Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, April 12th, 2022 at 6 p.m., 6:05. And this is the regular meeting of the Michigan City Board of Zoning Appeals. Before we begin, even with the roll call, I just wanted to acknowledge the passing of a former member of the Board of Zoning Appeals, Lester M. Norville Sr. He was on this commission or this board for many years, and he passed away at the age of 76 this past February 13th. And I just wanted to acknowledge his contributions to this board and all his years of service, not only here, but in the Michigan City Police Department. If anybody else knew him and would like to say something, I would welcome any contributions.
Yes. Of course, I'm new to the zoning appeals board for the last year, but I came here and of course I knew Lester through all the years when he was with the Michigan City Police Department and when he was a Red Devil. And it was a pleasure working with him through all these years and being acquainted with him. He was a real gentleman. He would really be missed in the community and here on the board.
Thank you, Fred.
I'd like to weigh in on that as well, if I might.
Sure.
I too knew Les as a policeman for most of his police career, for all of his career here on the Board of Zoning Appeals. And the best way to describe him is what Fred just said. He was one of the great gentlemen of this community, and he is truly going to be missed.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Anybody else? Okay. So then, Aaron, why don't we do the roll call?
Certainly. Ricky Jackson.
Present.
Fred Klinder.
Here.
Kathy Stransky. Let the record reflect Kathy Stransky is not here. Deborah Vance.
Present.
Lauren Zimmer.
Here.
And Attorney Steve Howe.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
And the next item is, since this is our first meeting of 2022, we need to elect the officers, chairman, vice chairman, and secretary. So Aaron, do you want to do the first one? And then I'll take over from there, or whoever is president would take over from there.
All right. Can I have who's interested in being president of the Board of Zoning Appeals? Nomination, please.
Yeah, make a nomination and Lawrence Zimmer be reappointed president, be reelected president of the Zoning Commission.
I'd like to second that, if I may, please.
Would the motion and the second reflect that it was nominating Mr. Zimmer as chairman of this body?
Chairman, thank you.
I accept.
All right. Can I have a roll call vote, please, starting with Ricky Jackson?
Yes.
Fred Klinder?
Yes.
Deborah Vance?
Yes.
And Lauren Zimmer?
Yes.
All right. Lauren Zimmer has been elected chairman.
Thank you, Aaron. So then the next office would be a nomination for the vice chairman. Anybody? Okay, so I will nominate Deb Vance.
I'll second that.
Do we have any other nominations? And just to verify, Deborah Vance, are you willing to be vice chair?
Yes.
Okay. Starting the roll call vote, Ricky Jackson,
Yes.
Freddie Klinder,
Yes.
Deborah Vance,
Yes.
Lauren Zimmer.
Yes.
Deborah Vance is now the vice chair.
The next office would be for the secretary. Is there a nomination? I will nominate Ricky Jackson as secretary.
Second.
Do we have any other nominations? Hearing none, just to confirm, Ricky Jackson, are you willing to be secretary if elected?
Yes.
All right, I will now proceed with the roll call vote. Ricky Jackson,
Yes.
Freddie Klinder,
Yes.
Deborah Vance,
Yes.
Lauren Zimmer.
Yes.
Ricky Jackson has been elected as secretary.
Great. Thank you. So the next item would be to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was December of 2021. But since we do not have a quorum of the members that were present at that meeting, we will postpone this line item of business until our next meeting, when hopefully we would have Catherine available and Fred and myself, which would be, the next meeting would be May 10th. Since there are no petitions this evening and no old business, the only item of business this evening is new business, in which Aaron is going to walk us through and review and approve the updated application for when people want to apply for a zoning variance.
All right, so in front of you, there is a revised petition for the Board of Zoning Appeals. The revision date is yesterday, 4/11/22. In your original packet, there was a revision for March 1st. There's been a few changes after consulting Attorney Steve Howe regarding some wordage and clarification. So just to kind of go over the intent of this application, which is really kind of to try to ensure that staff and most importantly, the board members are getting the information they need to either approve or deny even, or approve with conditions, a development standards variance, a use variance, or a special exception use, and to ensure that we're making decisions based on sound and substantial evidence. So I'm just going to go over it briefly. For example, it requires electronic copy in PDF format, vicinity map, a site plan or a concept plan, and this is really aimed at new construction. Not all of the applications will necessarily require this. And if there's an addition, any type of development that site plan is really needed, survey will be specifically needed for new construction, a written description of the project, the proposed findings and orders in number 6. So that's a small change that will be made after consulting with Steve Attorney this afternoon. Architectural drawings, there's been instances in the past, for example, where this body, given the information that we were provided for and it wasn't clear, has approved, for example, development standard variances without actual architectural drawings. It's hard to evaluate the standards for granting the variance or denying the variance or approving with conditions without having the full picture. So architectural drawings are a part of that. So these would include the floor plans, elevations, sections, roof plans. There are several avenues to truly evaluate the proposed petition and its impact. Next is a project data table. This is really just going to be a way of what is the required zoning metrics. For example, what is if the front yard setback is 20 feet, they'll indicate that, and then they will show the proposed metric that they're proposing. That may be 20, that may be less, in which case that's the variance they're actually applying for, or that may be larger. Next is the legal description. The largest change since the original draft went out would be the surrounding property owner list and map. Currently, we have a notice requirement of just the adjacent property owners, and that can go like across the street, a right away, a stream. This would change this. We're proposing to change this to a 300-foot buffer. That is partially just to make it easier to notice. It eliminates the confusion of what to notify, and also just to increase the transparency in the notice requirement so that more people are aware, because the impact of some requests may be larger than just the adjacent property owner. Below that is actually the how to do this in Beacon. So, there may be applicants who don't know how to use the radius function or the export. So you can even have labels created from this.
Excuse me, are there any major changes to what we've been, most of this sounds very familiar with what we've seen. Are there major changes here that were being introduced?
So the only major change is the notification, which is currently adjacent property owners, and staff is proposing to increase that to a 300-foot buffer. So lots of these are really just things that we should have been getting in the first place, maybe not always getting in the first place. So most applications you've seen, especially if they're from, a lawyer or there's a developer, most of these have probably always been in there. But that may not be true for all applications, but that is the only substantial change.
Mr. Zimmer,
Yes, sir.
may I be allowed to speak?
Yes, please.
I think I come with a different perspective on this question, Fred. Prior to being counsel for this body, I spent very, very many years appearing before boards of zoning appeals and similar boards, and have a significant amount of experience. And I can tell you that there are communities in this general vicinity of northern Indiana that do have a 300-foot or similar radius requirement for notification. And it was been my experience that does not provide significant roadblocks to providing notice. Then you might think, because you're going from an adjoining neighbor to 300 feet. It will, though, undoubtedly include more people rather than less. More people will be notified. I heard Aaron say that it provides more transparency, and that's certainly true. If more people are going to be notified, it will add some additional cost. I have in the past, and not relating to this proposal, but in general, in talking with attorneys, heard the statement that it will increase cost, and that would be a significant drawback to this sort of a thing. My experience as an attorney, preparing notice and filing notice documentation for seeking approval of petitions, is that it isn't a serious drawback, that the monetary additional cost is not significant and not worth considering in how you review this proposal, and that the 300-foot one is very workable if you would choose to use it. So I just wanted you to understand that as a practical matter, the practical concerns that I've experienced are not a hindrance to making this change.
Thanks, Steve. And Aaron, you said that there's a tool on Beacon that shows which properties should be contacted in that 300-foot radius?
That is correct. So there's two steps that I outlined just to ensure there's not an error. The first is to just create the owner's list. So that would be using the spatial function of the beacon, and then you can export directly to mailing labels and include the parcel ID of the where it's going. So the parcel ID of rather the property, and then the actual mailing address as on beacon. So it would be actually be, in some ways, could be considered a one-stop shop to a degree, because that just needs to be printed on labels, and then you can affix that to the green cards in the envelope.
Okay.
And the radius map would just be a similar functionality. I have not been able to figure out how to do it in one go, but it would just be 2 steps, and that's why the how-to is in there, just to help petitioners, whether they're professionals or just residents, being able to figure that out.
Okay. And of course, if they needed help, they could always call you, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Do you want to continue then with your brief, or is that?
There's just a few things I just want to complete. There's, on page 3 and 4, there is just kind of the steps and processes with that, as well as the Board of Zoning Appeals deadline and meeting dates. This is a way that it's very clear of what deadline is for a particular meeting. For example, for this meeting, which is April 12th, the deadline would have been March 7th. So this is being very transparent with when applicants need to actually submit. Page 5 is, kind of the meats and bones of the application. It's what type of application is this, whether it's a special exception use, development standards variance, use variance, or even administrative appeal. The applicant and owner information, some additional other information about the property, reason for petitioning, the current zoning of the property, as well as the zoning of adjacent properties on page 6. Going to page 7 is the permit fees. And then each box has associate fee, and then you would just say the total, and then either the signature of the owner or the petitioner, as well as it being notarized. Page 8 is the surrounding property owner list. This page can essentially just be copied again if the notification list is substantially long. Page 9 is the public notice requirements. And this page is has essentially been copied over from our current application with some minor revisions, and that being the 300-foot radius buffer that staff is proposing. Page 10 is the LaPorte County Herald Dispatch notice requirements. Associated with that, page 11 is the actual notice of public hearing. This is essentially a copy of what currently exists today. The affidavit of service on page 12 is a copy of what exists today, and pages 13, 14, 15, and 16 are the various findings and order for the various either development standards variance, the special exception use, or the use variance. This is a carbon copy of what exists today. And the last page, which will actually be removed most likely and just reincorporated into another section, is the affidavit of consent of the property owner. So I'll entertain any questions before I ask what I kindly ask the board to potentially make motions for.
Again, Mr. Zimmer, may I be allowed to speak?
Yes.
My job here is to advise you as to legal issues, and I'm going to try and limit a couple of comments just to that. And so my first comment would be item 12 on page 3. This proposal calls for a method of resolving a problem that we've faced in the past years on more than a few occasions. And that is confirming that the property owner is agreeing to whatever is requested. It isn't just the petitioner who often is not the owner, at least not the owner yet. Could be a builder or something of that nature. And we've always struggled and found ways, one way or another, to have the owner appear and acknowledge consent or submit some form of power of attorney, affidavit, or something of that nature. So Aaron is trying to solve that problem by requiring the owner, and it appears in another place in these forms too, requiring the owner to sign the petition. So now we know we have absolute confirmation that the owner approves the changes we're going to consider making. I have one drawback to that. For as long as I can remember, and unfortunately that's a very long time, lawyers have the power legally to sign and bind their clients. And lawyers have traditionally, before this body and other boards of zoning appeal that I'm familiar with, signed the petitions on behalf of their client. And there has not been a clamor or a request that the owner confirm what the attorney has represented to the body, both in the application and in his presentation. This body, since I've been its lawyer, has always accepted the attorney's signature. I know that there will be some concern that I will hear back if we're intentionally eliminating that permission. I just want you to be aware that it could be an issue and decide what you think about it. It's your call. We can certainly require that the owner sign in every instance, or we can permit lawyers to sign on behalf of the clients that they represent. They can't be representing the petitioner, they have to be representing the owner. In that case, they can bind, their signature would be on the petition, would be binding on the owner. For your information. The next thing I think is page 13. Nope. Page 11. This is just a simple notice document, and you think, well, how important can that be? But I think this body has always agreed with me that it's very important that the public receive adequate notice of what we're considering and what is going on. We refer to it as transparency, but we all understand what we're talking about. Sometimes, and it's not a significant problem in my mind, but sometimes the description of what the petitioner is requesting is rather limited and not very helpful. I've seen these notices say, I'm requesting a development standards variance. We all know that there are 150 different development standard variances that you could request. Which one is it? It would matter to his next door neighbor, certainly. Now, it does put the neighbor on notice that he should be inquiring, but I think it would be helpful, and I think Aaron and I had a discussion about this, and I think he is going to ask you to allow him to make some non-substantive changes. This would be one that I would wholeheartedly back, and that is that we put something in here that requires them to describe in detailed, perhaps summary, but detailed description of what they're actually requesting. Change the east side setback from the required 15 feet to 12 feet, whatever it is. That's just an example. And so those are my two big comments. Schuyler York was involved in this process. we've been talking about changing these rules for a very long time. Aaron has done a wonderful job and buckled down to get this before you. And I think it's important from a legal standpoint that we solidify these rules and get them passed as soon as we can.
Thank you, Mr. Hale.
Mr. Zimmer, may I add
Yes.
additional?
Yep.
Just so that the board is aware, the Historic Preservation Commission has already approved a simpler application of this based on the same format. They don't have the same notice requirements, so it's substantially shorter, but it's trying to also help all the planning applications be more similar than different. So also, this month, the Planning Commission application will be going before the Planning Commission, hopefully for their approval as well. So also with the proposed change, if the Board of Zoning Appeals approves the increase in notification requirement. So this is a way of aiding developers, lawyers, applicants, and creating a standardized application. Even though each application is different, they will share several similarities across the various different boards that people who seek to do business or living in Michigan City, they'll be a lot more similar than they are different.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's a great idea. Continuity and uniformity would make it easier for everybody. So, Mr. Hale, are you then, you're satisfied with the consent of the property owner clause that he has in here, or do you want to beef it up?
Two things, if I may.
Yeah.
The first is that Aaron and I have obviously been discussing this on several occasions, and I think what he's going to request is that you approve this draft, but give the planning department staff, including himself, the authority to make formatting and other minor, not substantive changes as we go along from time to time, month to month, year to year even. We've had our rules in before I came here. And so they've been in place for 12 or 15 years. So these rules could survive for that kind of period of time. If you do that, then I think the changes that I might suggest would fall into that category of being a minor change, just to add clarification. And I think it's good authority to give your planning department staff.
Okay.
And then, so I would be happy that I brought up that bit about lawyer signature because I'm going to hear about it, I know. And I would like to know what you guys think about it. And I would hope that you would voice your opinion.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm firmly of the opinion that either the petitioner has, the property owner has to sign it, or they have to sign a power of attorney to have the attorney sign. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, first of all, in reference to the detail of the variance, highly needed, and it's a great addition because I many times come here not knowing exactly what the variance is, just that they're wanting one, and then you got to try and think quick, and sometimes that's not easy. And the other thing concerning the lawyer and the owner, the relationship is something that, you know, I'm not familiar with, so that I can't actually say that I would have to require one over the other. I've always felt that if a lawyer was saying that this is what the owner is asking for, or is indicating that it's his request, that, boy, that's what the owner wants, that's the relationship they have. What we should require, I feel is probably something that's more, as you were saying, a legal aspect, verification of what's going on here. We want to make sure that whatever we're doing is what we're being told is the truth, and we can make our decision based on that.
Mr. Zimmer, if I may. Yes. So I agree 100% across the board, especially with the fact that you're not always dealing with lawyers. From experience, because I've been gone for a while, but before we would actually have contractors come in here. And it doesn't necessarily mean that contractor is acting on 100% exactly what the property owner wanted. So it's not this, it's not to say that he doesn't make slight changes and the next thing you know, the property owner's, where did this come from or what's going on? So yeah, I would agree with that. The property owner should be involved, whether we send a notice or whatever. The second part of this, again, it's been like 5 years, but we talked about these 5 years ago. And I think this is a fantastic, fantastic way that you guys have done this. Even looking at this, and I'm not saying at all that somebody should come up here and not have a general idea what's going on or not have legal counsel. But with this, it gives them a fantastic guide to start with. And then they can look at this and say, I can do this, or I need to go get help. So good job.
And I really like the idea of adding the project description, because I think a lot of people don't even know, like, what is a development standard variance or what is a use exception? If you just publish that, they don't even know what that means. So that's why the project description is definitely a good add to this. And the legal description is always just that taken off of the Plata survey, right? Where it gives all the meets and bounds and all that stuff. Is that correct?
That is correct. So it will either be if it's been previously subdivided, it will be the subdivision name and lot number, and block number if applicable. If it has not been formally subdivided, it would simply be the meets and bounds. And the legal description, I believe, is actually on the current application as well.
And would just be supplying a copy of the plat of survey? Would that be an adequate substitution to the legal description? Because sometimes they can be very long and lots of detailed, numbers and.
Just to kind of, this document will be available either in a fillable PDF or a fillable Word document. So that will just be something that someone could just copy and paste from Beacon into this application.
Okay.
So this, once all the changes are made, and as changes are made, if the board does approve this application tonight, that should be an instance of where it's just being copy and paste. If it does become a situation where someone does not have that means, staff will, at least all staff should accept a printout for Beacon, because Beacon will have that same information.
Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding this? Any further discussion? So then we're just looking for a vote then to approve this set of documents with the additional note that it can be tweaked as we go, as the plan department or you deem necessary.
So before we do that, I recommend opening it up to public comment just to
Okay.
ensure transparency.
Okay. All right. Any public comment regarding this new draft application? There's nobody watching. There's nobody here.
Is anyone watching? We're pretty bored.
I have no comment regarding that matter. So I believe it would be in the best interest to have two separate motions. The first motion, staff is recommending to have a 300-foot radius buffer. And that's just to make it clear that that is what the board is approving, if it's at the pleasure of the board. And the second motion would be to approve the draft application and allowing staff and legal to make non-substantial changes as necessary to ensure the application is always current.
Excuse me, can I ask in which of these areas is the 300 foot notification? And I didn't see it in specific terms.
It is specifically in section 10 on page 2, and it's surrounding property owner list plus map. The public hearing requires the names and the addresses of all property owners within a 300-foot buffer from the subject property parcel shall be provided. The buffer, that radius is also mentioned in a few other portions of the application.
It's also on page 9, Fred, highlighted in yellow,
Page 9, 11.
or well, right above where it's highlighted in yellow.
And the yellow highlight will be removed as well.
Oh, yeah, I was looking at my copy that I got at home. Didn't indicate that, sorry.
The new copy that was handed in front of you has the latest updates.
Yeah. Now I'm current.
Mr. Zimmer, if I may, I'd like to make a motion that we accept or adopt the 300-foot buffer on the notification. Is that what way you pronounce it? I'm sorry. The notification list.
Yes,
From-
the notification of everyone within a 300-foot radius of the edge of the property in question would be required.
So be it.
Second,
I will now do a roll call vote. Ricky Jackson,
Yes.
Freddie Klinder,
yes.
Deborah Vance,
Yes.
Warren Zimmer.
Yes.
Let the record reflect that the Board of Zoning Appeals now has a 300-foot buffer radius requirement for notification.
So then the second one, Aaron, why don't you just state again what you stated before?
Can't guarantee it'll be word from word. Motion to approve the draft application and allowing staff and legal to make non-substantive changes as necessary to the application.
So moved.
I'll second that.
We'll now do a roll call vote. Ricky Jackson,
Yes.
Freddie Klinder,
Yes.
Deborah Vance,
Yes.
Warren Zimmer.
Yes.
Let the record reflect that the motion has a pass, and just so the board's knowledge that this application will have final edits over the next couple days, as we discussed. And just for additional clarification, if something was worded incorrectly, but it will largely be the same that you have tonight in front of you and received last night. And then the application will be available to the public, and this will be the application moving forward fairly quickly.
Thank you, Aaron. So one more time, is there any public comment regarding this item of business this evening? So hearing none, public comment is closed. And if there are no further comments from mission members?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes.
As they say, my mom used to say the horse may already be out of the barn, but I think it's worthy for me to, it's something that I need to say to emphasize to the zoning commission, the planning commission, the members here, and to the city in Plain that I think we should not allow or should modify to some degree what we have the South Shore doing to the northwest streets all over Michigan City, closing them as they indicated, in particularly Pine Street. If any of you have tried to get around town in the last week or so, you've seen how difficult, for lack of a better word, it is right now. It's the streets are blocked up, and it's just not convenient to get anywhere. There was a number of years ago, there was a study done by St. Andrews, I think, a university up in Michigan, that came and did a study on what we needed to do in Michigan City. That was when I was first here on the planning commission. And the one big emphasis they made was to make Washington Street two-way, make Pine Street two-way, and Franklin Street. And in order to allow the movement of people, to make it easier for people to get here, if you want your town to live, they got to be able to get here. Of course, the other thing was to get down to Lake Michigan, and that's still somewhat of a problematic situation. I don't want to put all the eggs in one basket when it comes to the railroad, but I worked at Bethlehem Steel in the transportation department for a number of years. And the railroads are not easy to work with. I got to own up to the fact that the South Shore of all of them was probably the most accommodating. But we've had Tilden Street blocked off for 6 months in Michigan City here, which is kind of a major street getting to the north and south again. And the railroads just don't respond. And we're going to have the same problem through the years when we close off all these streets, I'm afraid. It can be done. They can do it quicker. I was just on vacation. They blocked off Jensen Beach Boulevard for a month to put in double tracking and a roundabout, and they got it done in less than a month in the amount of time that they were given. But that's not always the case. And I just wanted to make everybody aware that, like I say, maybe the horse is out of the barn already, and we've given them too much authority, but we ought to do whatever we can to modify those changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Any other comments, questions before we adjourn? Hearing none, then we are adjourned until May 10th, 6 o'clock in this chamber. Thank you.